Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Monday, October 7th, 2024, Town of Rhinebeck Planning Board meeting. We are expecting Elise to be a little late, but she is intending to be here this evening. First order of business is to confirm the posted meeting agenda. I don't know of any changes or corrections. Gretchen?
Nope.
No? Jim? You received your meeting notes from Jim. Have you had a chance to look at them? And if so, any questions or comments?
No.
Mark, have a motion, second?
Second, Sean.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. You have in draft form the September 16th minutes. Are there any corrections, additions? Have you had a chance to look at them? May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Sharon, second. Edna, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Correspondence and announcements? Anything? Anyone?
No.
Okay. This evening, we have no new applications, and we have a couple minutes to wait before the first public hearings this evening. So Jim, can we jump ahead to the ZBA referral? One or two? We can knock those off.
Yeah, so let's maybe start with the second one first. This is a little less conversation by me. One of the ZBA applications is for Christopher and Laura Hines. They are proposing, and as you know, we saw them last time. They're proposing to construct a pool pavilion, sanitary and water supply connection to the pool pavilion, and associated landscape improvements on their property next to and adjacent to the existing pool. They need a front yard setback per 125/27A3. To permit the accessory structure to project closer to the fronting street than the principal building lot. As you know, it's a corner lot, so they're on Morton and Mill, and this projects closer to Mill than the house. In general, I don't see an issue with the structure location in front of the house, given the distance from the road, the existing and proposed vegetation to obscure the structure, the location adjacent to the existing pool, and the likelihood that if the pool were to be moved elsewhere on the site, given the layout and desire to preserve the undeveloped areas between the house and the Hudson River, which is essentially everything that would be in any other yard than the front yards, because there are two of them on this lot, we'd likely still probably require the same variance if they moved it somewhere else on the lot. So my thought, obviously it's up to you, is that the planning board could refer this back to the ZBA as the variance not finding any significant planning or environmental concerns. And they rely on their own study of the facts in deciding the application. But I open it to you.
Craig and I were just there for a site visit, and I think what you said is completely correct.
And Sharon and I were there previously, and I would concur. I don't really think there's anything to add to this referral to go back to the ZBA. It's pretty straightforward. So could I have a motion to accept?
Great job, Jim. First, I want to say.
Hey, starting off on a good note.
All right, I could have a motion, please.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. So for the minute,
I have 605 on my computer. Do you want to do the next one, or do you want?
let's do the next one.
Okay.
We've done.
All right, so this one is going to require a little more talking by me. This one is an application by Meyerson. They are on 656 Route 308 in the RC5 zoning district. They're looking to install a pool on their property, as well as a patio pool equipment shed in a fenced-in enclosure behind the house. They are looking for a side yard variance of 9.3 feet for the pool and patio, and a variance of 22.75 feet for the pool equipment shed. The applicant stated there's no other viable location for the proposals. The front yard isn't an option, and the rear yard is constrained by wetland buffer and flood area. The area proposed for construction is outside the flood areas based on Dutchess County parcel access review. However, it's not outside what parcel access and the application shows is the historical flood area, which extends well beyond the proposed area of construction to include the actual house well into the front yard. So the historical flood area that's being shown actually encompasses most of the property, as it does with most of the properties up in this area on 308. My concern really doesn't have to do anything with the variance itself. The side yard setbacks, I don't see any real issues with that. It's more concern about the capacity of the lot to be developed for something like this. because while the construction is proposed outside of the flood area, it is adjacent to that, and being within the historical flood area, given the events of recent years with the flooding that we've had, to extents we've never really seen before, it does create concerns for me that the pool in particular and the associated improvements will likely get flooded in the future at some time. Properties throughout the town and the country have been experiencing these flooding issues, and if flooding occurs, I think it's likely that it will create extensive damage to the pool, the mechanicals, and result in potentially expensive repairs. My thought was that if the application is to be approved, that the potential for damaging flooding to the proposed improvements should be discussed with and acknowledged by the applicant and recorded in the meeting minutes of the ZBA, preferably written into the resolution that it is a risk the property owners are willing to take and acknowledge, so that it's clear it was done with careful consideration of the potential for that damage for the personal property. So my concerns with this really aren't with the variance itself, it's more with the action of what's being proposed here. I did also find that the patio is installed right up to the DEC wetland. There is a fence proposed within the DEC wetland buffer per the sheet that was submitted. And based on a review of the DEC freshwater requirements, any physical disturbance in the DEC 100-foot wetland buffer requires the applicant to go to the DEC for a permit. So if they are going to move forward with a fence in the wetland area, they're going to have to, I believe, secure a DEC wetland permit for that fence and any disturbance that would occur for construction. They're building right up to that line, and I can't imagine you're going to build the patio and the pool and things right up to the line without disturbing into that line. So my thought was that, the work for the pool mechanicals, patio associated work raises concerns related to the capacity for development of the lot, specific to flooding of the proposed property, but that the setback variances, the side yard variances themselves do not necessarily raise an issue. That's where I've landed on this. But again, I open it up to you for discussion.
Planning board members, comments, questions?
Do you have anything to look at, like a site plan or anything?
Sorry. This is the existing survey. So as you can see, this is the house, this is the lot. The historic floodplain goes somewhere up around in this area here in front of the house. And they're proposing to construct it back here. And these are the renderings of what's being proposed behind the house. And I believe there is, there we go. This is the sheet that shows what's being proposed on the ground. So,
And where would the water come from? From the house area? In other words, if the pool got flooded, wouldn't the house also get flooded or not?
yes, but the house is already there. I'm not
Right.
concerned about the existing house. I'm concerned that additional construction could get, damaged by flooding, and I want to make sure that it's clear that that has been discussed, and if they're willing to take that risk, that we don't have someone coming back in the future saying, how'd you let this move forward? You should have alerted me to the risk of potential flooding and damage to the pool. Because as you can see, this is the 100-foot setback. This line, I believe, is the 100-foot DEC wetland setback, which comes right up to the edge there. The historic flooding area kind of comes up in front of the house, and the fence comes all the way back in here. So I think they're going to need a DEC permit, but that will be on the applicant to determine and make sure that that's the case. So, like I said, just given all the flooding we've seen, I am concerned, that this could get flooded. So I just want them to be absolutely clear that that is a possibility. It really doesn't have anything to do with the variance per se, but I thought it was something that we were passing on if you agree.
So at this point, you'd be attempting to share these concerns with the ZBA?
Yes.
Not that it would necessarily influence their decision, but just something to make them aware of as they're doing their review.
It's also, I think, suggesting that it be recorded as part of their deliberation and being very clear that the client has been made aware of that.
Right, however they feel that's appropriate, and John and Kim would obviously work with the ZBA to make that decision, but I just think it's important that, it be documented on behalf of the town that this was discussed.
Then we could recommend that in the ZBA determination, they put that in writing.
Yeah, I would send my notes along with this. Essentially, the referral would be, in my opinion, we see no issues with the variances per se, but we do see issues with the overall project and with concerns related to flooding.
Anybody else?
And then we can.
So I see two things here. something for,
So the second one is just your typical, there are no issues. I think we would go with the first one, which essentially is that it says, specifically, it raises concerns related to the capacity for further development of the lot, specifically related to the potential for flooding of the proposed improvements. Some concerns related to this include, and I will just include my notes up in here summarized, and then say the variances themselves don't raise any issues, per se. It's
I'm
something
okay
that-
with that. Everybody else?
Yeah, thanks.
Have a motion, please?
So moved.
Sharon, second, Tom, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Going back to the regular order of business here and opening the public hearings for this evening. The first public hearing for this evening is Drake Miller, 78 to 90 Salisbury Turnpike, a site plan review and wetlands permit for an addition in hardscape. Good evening. Just like to update us with any new information, and we'll take it from there.
Microphone.
You want to be a separate hot date?
Jessica, you have it?
But you've got that one else.
You want me to go through what we're proposing, or just possibly just changes?
Just a big picture review. Does anybody need a refresher on this per se? How about just a general description?
Yeah, so we're going to remodel the existing single-family dwelling on 78. It's really 78, and the barn is 90. Or is it the other way?
I think it's the other way.
It's the other way. 90 is the house, 78 is the and do an addition on the on the left side of the drawing, or the west side of the single-family dwelling. That will require new foundation, new footing, so some disturbance, which is why we're applying for a wetland permit, because we are within 100 foot of a small creek to the north. The existing property is, so the existing dwelling is. But what we're proposing is to do a high-performance, low-carbon remodel. And that's noteworthy. We want to do a whole new septic, because we're going from 3 bedrooms to 4 bedrooms, and that should be in this updated site plan. Should have all the information in one place, where everything is indicated. New well in the front, and then some tree removal. And one thing that came up from the site visit is that we're now proposing to demolish the garage. After some conversation, it made more sense to remove it because of the condition, as you probably noticed, it's just really in a state of disrepair, and so we'd probably rather get it out of the way first rather than later. So that. I think
And not to be replaced at this time?
No.
Okay. Jim?
I just had 2 comments. First of all, it looked like a couple trees have been proposed to be removed that I don't think were last time. Is that true?
Correct, yeah,
I
that,
was just wondering if you could just explain what's going on there.
Sure. The house is basically surrounded by some large sugar maples, 3 in the front. The one being removed in the front, the middle one, and that reason for that being that it's very unhealthy, poses a danger to the house. It has a huge gash in front of it, so I mean it really has a matter of months or years left before falling, and it would fall towards the house. The 2 in the back, we proposed removing mainly because we're unsure if they'll survive what needs to be done for foundation work. But the idea is to potentially, after everything is staked out, see where they are and dig the foundation without removing them to see if they survive. So it would be trying to save at least one of the 2. And then some on the side are just like some little shrubs and cleaning up some dead trees. That will just ultimately, should just be removed for aesthetic reasons, and we will then be replanting some new stuff. Following the completion of the renovation, doing some minor landscaping. Once everything's done, to just make it all look nice and cohesive.
I submitted pictures of each tree and its condition, so that you should be able to go through and look at the.
And we can address that in our site visit report.
Yeah.
Right.
We can talk specifically about it.
And then the only other comment I had is, I think we agreed with this last time we talked, was that all construction vehicles and materials and everything will go through the back, you know, be stored over in the back here. I didn't see a note to that extent on the plans, so unless I missed it.
There was, well, access to
Oh,
the
it's
back, well, maybe once the.
Construction, delivery, entrance,
Okay.
exit is where those two driveways are. It's pointing to the two gates in front of the barn, which are larger than the driveway space and would allow for any sort of large vehicles to come onto the property.
So they're gonna come in this way now?
Yep.
So we're factoring in deliveries through here, materials stored.
We're storing,
in the barn on
we're
the
storing stuff
outside,
in the barn.
and then no traffic in the front here. Some probably, you know, my crew and, you know, me will be parking in this general area, but in terms of staging and material removal or machinery and, you know, I think really the construction will stick to this area here. But, you know, and as far as staging, either in the barn or behind it, so nothing will be permanent, nothing from, yeah.
Yeah, if that's okay with the board, I think that's fine. That was all I had.
Sean and I did a site visit. Sean, do you want to take it away?
Oh, sure, why not?
Yeah.
One of the things during the site visit, we did notice some of the trees that they did submit pictures of that were in pretty terrible shape, and knowing that they're in bad shape and they're going to probably be disturbed, we definitely suggested that they be, just so that everyone on this board is aware of it. Overall, it's a pretty straightforward project. You know, where they're going to put in the addition, makes a lot of sense to put an addition there. The garage is in pretty bad disrepair, and will probably make it a lot easier to work around the house and do everything else to get rid of that at this point. Other than that, it's a beautiful property. When we were on site, we did talk about the construction entrance. There's a better line of sight there too, by that barn area. You can see much further and much clearer. There's less brush and things for pulling in, pulling out for construction vehicles, which is why that came up. And the barn is quite large and perfect spot to store things. One thing to note, they are in the wetland, as it's been very dry, but that I did notice, and I took a couple pictures of that creek that is right now, you know, dirt and a couple rocks. But we did talk about just obviously is making sure that fencing and everything is in place, which is done on the plans.
Yeah, there should be
Yeah.
an erosion control plan also. with
yeah,
all the
exactly.
details. It should be.
Other than that, you know, it's a beautiful property, and it's nice to see it. It's in definitely need of repair, and it's nice to see it being repaired.
I don't have anything to add. You know, it makes great sense when you get out there, especially with those trees. It's very tight, the back of the house to the,
Yeah.
before the property slopes up. And it
There-
just made sense to us to deal with the trees, or at least acknowledge that there could be a problem at this time. There's some limbs on there that if they come down are just going to land right on the new addition.
Yeah.
So,
And significant pruning is also in that, because it does also come over the roof, it's what's deteriorating the roof. Half of the roof is covered in moss.
I mean, yeah, I mean, they're beautiful they're beautiful old trees. I mean, certainly provide very nice shade to the house now, but
Yes, that's one thing we do love also.
yeah, I mean, it makes for a nice backyard. But here's the condition that we're looking at in some of them.
And the smaller trees are really small caliber, not, they're like, you know, not something that's been there probably for 5 to 7 years of that. They're kind of random, they're in pretty rough shape already.
Yeah, one I believe is a dead crab apple, and then it's actually some lilac bushes that even if you cut them, they'll probably grow back healthier.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we could
Good luck at
pull them out and
Yeah,
bring
exactly.
them back possibly,
Right.
but they really don't live, they don't belong in that little
And there's the
small
garage that we don't feel adds much right now to the property.
Definitely.
Um,
It was more a matter of when we would get rid of it,
Yeah,
Because we were then initially.
At one point, we talked about using it for storing supplies and
And
material.
carpentry work and stuff like that, just to have
I think that's it for the site visit report. Questions, comments from the board?
For the trees that you're taking out, is there any plan to replant something in a different spot? Maybe a more.
Yeah. Well, we have a plan, it's not like concrete, but we definitely want to plant more trees.
Okay.
Anyone else? Is there anyone here from the public wishing to comment on this application? If there is no public comment, could I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Jim, we have a draft approval resolution.
So, draft approval resolution for Drake Miller for site plan wetlands permit under Town Code Chapter 125, Section 12572 and 120-4 respectively for addition and hardscaping at 78 to 90 Southbury Turnpike within the RC5 zoning district. Reaffirming the action is type 2 under seeker, for which board environmental quality review is not required. With respect to the application for wetlands permit, finding the work and intended use consistent with the general standards for, let's just say, wetlands permits. And granting the wetland permit conditioned upon site plan approval. With respect to the application for site plan approval, finding the work and intended use to be consistent with Town Code Chapter 125. And approving the application inclusive of the materials and site plan submitted. Authorizing the planning board chair to stamp and sign the site plan upon the applicant's satisfaction of the 3 conditions listed here. And in taking this action, the planning board authorizes the town, essentially authorizes the town to issue the required permits. And we want to note that all plans, sketches, other materials submitted to the town of Rhinebeck Building Department for any required permits, including CO or certification of completion, must match the materials approved by the planning board. Any submissions that differ from what was submitted to the planning board could be rejected at the discretion of the town CEO.
Have a motion?
So,
Second. Motion and second, all in favor, board Craig?
Aye.
Edna? Aye. John?
aye.
Sharon? Aye. And I vote aye. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
The second public hearing for this evening is that of Barry and Violet Hill Road. Site plan, special use permit, stone wall, and patio. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Lauren Cause. I'm here, I work for the Art of Building. I'm the project manager for the project at 41 Violet Hill Road. I'm here this evening on behalf of my client, Barry Entner, for an application for a special use permit to build a stone patio and stone wall. If you look at the site plan ahead of us, you can see the So the main house is here. There are 3 other structures on the property that are not included in this part of the project. The proposed area is at the west portion of the main residence. It is depending which way you measure it, from the property line between 130 and 150 feet from the property line, and a little bit further than that back from Violet Hill Road. If you want to go to the next slide, please. Okay, so the stone patio is here. It's about 16 feet by 24 feet. The stone wall is a U-shaped structure. Overall, about 30 by about 9. This portion of it is 18 inches above the level of the patio. There are 2 steps down to a lower portion of the grade, another 18-inch segment, and then a 36-inch segment into which we could build a gas grill. If you look at the section in the upper left, most of the patio, thank you, you can see the dotted line, which was the existing grade. So the patio is primarily fill. We did very minimal excavation for the footing. And you can see that the existing grade sort of slopes away. So, right, so you can see our patio level, our 18-inch bench, and then beyond that, 36-inch counter height grill and food preparation area. This is all done as part of a cohesive master plan for the entire property. That's consistent materials, very thoughtfully coordinated with the historic nature of the property. And if you go to the next slide, just this image here. So this is also important. In addition to its distance from Violet Hill Road, you can see here's Violet Hill Road, the house, and these two small L's are the location of the proposed stone wall. And you can see that the house is heavily screened from Violet Hill Road, so you can't really see this. It's heavily screened and also quite a bit uphill from it. In addition to the stone wall, just something to note is that there is some lighting associated with it. If we go back to the previous slide, we have a few step lights that are incorporated into it. There's 5. There's also a bollard. And if you go forward, we have some cut sheets for the proposed fixtures. So this is the step light that would go into the wall, clearly facing down, and then the bollard looks like this. This would be another option.
Do you have a preference?
I like the first one. This one was, depending on what we plant there, it might make more sense to have something sort of lower and downward that we could adjust.
Do you want a choice made?
That's up to the board. I mean, I had no additional comments from last time. I think it's essentially a design discussion. We talked about the 1A, 1B, but it's already been disturbed. So really it's just a discussion amongst the board and make sure you're comfortable with what's.
So site visit conducted?
Let me jog my memory. It's been so long. Tom and I were there just a couple of hours ago.
Oh, okay.
We had some difficulty in getting the schedule. You want to? Go ahead. Okay. Just as Laura said, it's compatible with the surroundings. It seems to be very neatly and professionally executed. It's blends in well with the landscape, makes a lot of sense, and it would, I think, be a real beneficial appurtenance to the house. Nice place to spend some time outdoors and do some outdoor cooking. And, incorporating the walls with the seating is a really good idea. And the downlights, I think, are low profile and unobtrusive. I think either selection would be acceptable. So that's about all I have.
Well, the entire property did an amazing job of taking a very old house, bringing it back to life, putting Lauren hadn't pointed out where the extension on the house was. You couldn't tell. They must have done milling of the siding to get it to match so much. So their whole consideration going forward is just improve the property. And this is, she said they took out a wood deck there, and this is, no matter how nice the wood deck was, this has to be a much better option. So.
Anything else? Questions, comments, planning board members?
Is there anyone here from the public who wishes to comment on this application? Jen, nothing more from you. So you have, so then I would take, if there's no one here, motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
All those in favor? Second, opposed?
Aye.
The motion is second. All those in favor, opposed, abstentions? Thank you. All right. Have an approval, draft approval resolution.
I do. Draft approved resolution for the board's consideration for the application by Barry Endner for site plan special use permit under Town Code Chapter 125 for construction of the stone wall and patio 41 Violet Hill Road within the RC5. Affirming the action is type 2 under seeker. Reaffirming the action is type 2 under seeker, I'm sorry. With respect to the application for special use permit, finding the work and intended use is consistent with the general standards for special use permits and granting the requested special use permit, conditioned upon site plan approval. And with respect to the site plan approval, finding the work and proposed use is consistent with Town Code Chapter 125, Section 12575, and approving the application inclusive of the materials and site plan by the art building. Authorize the planning board chair to stamp and sign the site plan subject to the 3 conditions listed there. And taking the action authorizing the town to provide, submit any, or to give, I should say, any permits required to undertake the work. And reminding the applicant that all plans, sketches, and other materials submitted to the planning board have to be consistent with what is submitted to the zoning administrator and the building department, or they can be rejected.
May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Motion second. Call the board. Craig?
Aye.
Linda? Aye. Tom?
Aye.
Sharon? Aye. Sean?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Good luck. Very welcome. The third public hearing this evening, is that for Alexander's?
I can reject.
We can share. Is that for Alexander Wright, 23 East Road, site plan, special use permit, wetlands permit, tree removal, and light brush clearing? Good evening.
So I think we're here partly to hear the results of the Hudsonia review on a voluntary remediation plan, but my understanding is there is no word yet from Hudsonia. Okay. So the other thing I wanted to ask is, we have, at the last board meeting, there were some questions. There were 3 questions in particular, and today I received a letter from Labella. I thought I would get it sooner. Would it be appropriate to share the letter? I have made copies if you're interested. It just answers the questions that were raised. I could also just quickly outline the answers. It would probably...
Has that information been sent to Hudsonia?
Well, no, this isn't about Hudsonia. This is about the questions that you raised last board meeting.
I was just thinking that anything that we had relative to it would probably be appropriate for Hudsonia to have it.
Yeah,
So
no, it was more along the lines of like how much square footage, things like that. I can also just share the letter. We don't have to discuss it. I was going to obviously forward it, but I literally got it today. So my question, I guess, is would you like to see it? And would you like me to summarize what the letter says?
Sure.
Okay. So the summary is in answer to questions raised. First question, there was a miscommunication in the last meeting about how much square footage we were actually talking about. So that has been clarified. It's 0.28 acres. On the 3rd page, you'll see the site plan, which we had submitted a long time ago. 0.28 acres equates to 12,550 square feet. So there was, when our senior, or Nick Bamas, the senior civil engineer, he misstated the acreage. What he was referring to was the full drainage basin that sits above our property. And that is much, much larger and is, in our opinion, the reason our property floods frequently, as do all the other properties on East Road. The second point of clarification was about how much topsoil there was and how much, what mechanical equipment was used to distribute that topsoil. So Kelso Landscaping, who did the work, provided this strangely formatted letter, but you can call him if you want, but there's consistent You know, what he did is he dumped some topsoil in our backyard and distributed that with mechanical equipment. There was no excavation, there was no grading, it was simply distributing 57 cubic yards of material, which equates to about 1.5 inches of topsoil. So hopefully we can put any speculation that more work was done to rest. That was also confirmed by Nick Vamas, this civil engineer, that there was no evidence that there was grading done. The third question had to do with, the board asked about coordinating with the U.S. Army Corps. So at the bottom of this letter, he writes a little update on that, which is that they spoke to the U.S. Army Corps, and the U.S. Army Corps did not think that this small amount of work we did warranted a permit under their Army Corps. I mean, I'm not that familiar, to be honest, with like the situation, but you can read the paragraph. But they are apparently extremely busy and don't think they can do another review after the first review. So hopefully that does answer any questions or speculation. I do think that, as I mentioned in the last board meeting, you know, a separate issue on all of our properties is having to do with flooding, and we need to ideally get Dutchess County involved. Brian Sokolick, I think, sent you a letter, and he agrees there's a much larger conversation about, nothing to do with our property, but about the larger drainage situation and the flooding issues we've been having. But what we're hoping as homeowners is we can move forward once Lithonia hopefully gets back to us and, you know, put this to rest. Like, we want to move forward with the remediation, and we don't want to keep having to bother you and take our time and money to continue to litigate this. So hoping for a resolution soon. Wondering if,
So the paragraph on the Army Corps of Engineers is, this is recording a verbal conversation that took place. There's nothing in writing. Is that correct? This is just
it
recording Brian's conversation with them?
sounds like that's the case, yeah. Yeah.
Jim?
I have no new comments. Again, just, we are waiting on Hudsonia, and I know we did get that letter from Dutchess County Soil and Water talking about this, which I can put up on the screen if you want, but if you haven't seen that letter, I think you should take a look at that.
Just today, correct?
Yeah, I think I've seen it today.
Did everybody get a chance to at least notice that it's here? Okay, well, obviously we have time to look at that because I believe Hudsonia is moving ahead to, yes, John?
Yes, the problem with Hudsonia was Eric was sick, and anyway, he's back and starting to catch up now, and he's reviewed the Labella report, and the next thing he wants to do is to come down and take a look at the property, so he'll be reaching out to you to make a time to come down, maybe as soon as this week.
Okay. Planning board members, anything?
I thought the soil and water letter was very interesting, and I'm wondering whose bailiwick this is. A separate comprehensive look at the entire drainage area, in other words, the neighborhood, needs to be undertaken from Rhinecliff Road all the way to the top of the drainage area.
I would agree with you. It's an interesting comment, and I'm not sure where responsibility for that falls. Didn't sound like Soil and Water was taking it up as a project.
No, it did not. But would the highway department start looking at that, or who in town would look at that?
I don't know. John or Kim, do you have any idea where something like that would go in terms of evaluating a section of town that seems to be prone to something? What would be the process for that?
I'd have to see, I haven't seen the soil and water letter, so I'll try to answer that after I take a look at it.
We're essentially talking about a flood study, I think, flood assessment, and that would have to start at the town board level to some degree. But exactly what that would entail, that would, require some conversation. But I'm involved in a lot of these. They typically get initiated by the town. State DEC can be involved, and others.
do they get initiated by the town after the situation is brought to the town's attention by people living in that area?
That certainly could be.
Or it could be the highway department or somebody else making them aware of it.
I mean, the planning board can also alert the town board to the situation that exists there. And I mean, if anything going forward is going to require the expenditure of funds, they're going to have to be involved in it from that standpoint.
Well, Dutchess Water Soil, or Dutchess County Soil and Water seems to be completely aware of the much larger conversation revolving around the frequent flooding in the area of Boost Road. A separate comprehensive look at the entire drainage area still needs to be undertaken.
Well, I mean, we could, as a planning board, forward that letter, that particular letter. You know, Jim could put something together and forward it to town and say, this has been brought to our attention by Soil and Water. Where they go with it at that point would be up to them.
I think maybe the first step might be to provide a copy of that letter to Alan Scher, and you can sort of brief Alan when you have one of your regular meetings. And then
I think it makes sense to wait until we get the Hudsonia report and maybe lump all of that information together so that Alan is the liaison for those who aren't aware from the town board to the planning board. So we try to bring larger issues to his attention as they come up. And that's an appropriate next step, I think.
And the Hudsonia may have information or knowledge about why it's so subject to flooding. You know, because they have been doing a lot of mapping and so forth. They could probably add to this.
All right, anything from planning board members before I open it up for public comment? All right, anyone here from the public wishing to comment?
Oh, Robert McClinchy, 3 Hickory Drive, Rhinebeck, New York, right off the Bice Road. Been here several months, it's been on almost a year now since we've been dealing with this issue. I hope this issue gets rectified soon before the rainy season comes and the water comes because of the damage that's doing to my property and my house. I understand we gotta get other agencies involved, but just to be clear, if you dump 80 tons of dirt on a property that used to flood, that does not flood no more, where's that water going? That's the issue. Where's the water going? I understand you can look back at the farmer's property and it goes all the way back to Rhinebeck Road and everybody gets flooded. I've been there 25 years. I never experienced that water since the work been done on that property. 80 tons. It's more than an inch of dirt. It wasn't spread out over an acre of property. If our yard used to get flooded, now the yard don't get flooded anymore because there's a swing set there. And it's great. Where's that water going? It's going into the stream, where it's pushing all that water into my yard. I mean, for me, I'm in the trades. I'm a construction worker. I deal with excavation my whole life. I know how it's done. Very simple. If there was no problem with the property, why would you put dirt there? The property didn't flood, why would you put dirt there? I'm not talking 2 wheelbarrows, I'm talking 80 tons. That's tri-axles. That's my concern. That's why I'm so concerned about this issue, because come November, December, when it starts to rain and there's snow coming, my house goes on the water. Then how do I live there? Then I come to the planning board, what are we gonna do? They're under violations for over a year now. I understand it takes steps to take care of this process, but now we'll keep pushing off another agency. Why don't we just go and rip out all the 80 tons of dirt and start over? Let's do that, and then see if my house floods. I'm not questioning that my yard used to get water in the back of my yard. Back of my yard. I've been there for 25 years. Like I said before, I opened up a lot of permits here. I went through special use permits here. I put an addition there. If I was gonna get water, I wouldn't put an addition there. Why would I build the house in swamp? Doesn't make sense. So please, let's try getting this moving along move it along, because I'm concerned about my house and my property.
Thank you.
That's what I got to say. Thank you. Thank you.
I just have one question regarding sorry, Christina McClinchy out of Provinceville. I just had a question regarding Dutchess County soil and water. The assessment and the letter that he wrote, did he actually come out and look at the property again? Because the date that he came and met with me, we weren't able to access any of the properties that are her property or behind her property either. He just was able to see our yard, and that was kind of where it stopped. So was he able to come out and actually look at the area, or is he basing his assessment on information that was provided to him from where? I don't know.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I can answer that question. if you'd like.
By all means.
So when I spoke to Brian Skolaric from Dutchess County Soil and Water, and that was Brian Tam's suggestion, because I actually was not aware that he had already spoken to the McClinchys. So I really appreciated that advice. I spoke to him, and he had come out to talk to you. We had an email that we would allow you access to our property, so I'm not sure why he didn't see it, but maybe he could have come back to see it later. When I spoke to him, he said that he was not going to respond to neighbors or individual homeowners, that he wanted to have the town or the board engage in this conversation, because it's not, you know, our property is quite small in comparison to the huge basin, and he said that this is a bigger issue. So he did not come out to the property, but he did encourage the board, and this doesn't have anything to do with this permit, but that's why I passed that along at the last board meeting, and you guys reached out to him. So I'm a little surprised by the tone in that letter, that it sounds like he wouldn't be willing to engage in that conversation. He gave me the impression he would, and I think that would be in your best interest and ours, because if there is remediation that could happen at a government level or that would be great. We would be very open to that, but I don't think the work we did on planting grass and putting topsoil was the cause of this. I think it's historic levels of precipitation, and that is well documented in the 2023 National Climate Weather Data. So I would just like to say, yes, he may not have been to the property. If he wants to come, he's absolutely open and welcome to come. I think he should survey the whole area, but that request would probably need to come from someone other than our neighbors or ourselves.
Thank you. So, John, do you think it's reasonable to continue this for 1 month? And does that give Hudsonia plenty of time to get back to us? Is that a yes?
Yeah, I think Eric was hoping to come down to visit the property this week.
Okay.
I'll have to I'll work with Gretchen and get Eric in touch with the applicant.
I sent all their contacts to him today, so he has all their emails and phone numbers.
All right, so we would be continuing this to what date, Gretchen?
November 4th.
May I have a motion to continue the public hearing until the November 4th meeting?
So,
Motion second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. The last public hearing this evening was Mike's Tree Service, Route 9, site plan review, use of front office as a medical office. I believe we are still in the line we're still in the queue.
Yeah, excuse me, we just received a letter from the health department, a review letter from the health department today. Since David Pearson was the engineer on the project, he's since retired, so it's been handed off to another engineer for the county. So we just received a letter today that we need to respond to. So,
which is essentially transferring it to somebody else. Is that what the?
No, it was an actual review letter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we're making some progress with the health department.
Good. 1 month continuation?
Yes, please.
May I have a motion to continue the let me ask if anyone here from the public before. Okay, hearing none, may I have a motion to continue?
Sorry, continuation of what?
The public hearing on Mike's Tree Service to November 4th. We have been waiting on a health department review on that. Right, everybody?
Yeah, so,
Motion,
Second.
second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. That brings us to old business. The first one to pick up is Florence and Gaynor, 521 Mill Road, site plan and special use permit for the construction of a single-family dwelling. My recollection is that this one and the next one, the public hearings were closed on these, and we're simply waiting for health department approval. Is that correct?
That's correct, and we have received health department approval
All right.
on both projects.
Any comments, questions from planning board members? If not, I'm willing to entertain a motion to, you've got the
Okay.
approval resolution, so you have to deal with the public hearing that's already been closed.
Draft approval resolution for the board's consideration tonight for site plan special use permit under Town Code Chapter 125 for construction of a house on 531 Mill Road within the RA10 zoning district, reaffirming the proposed action is type 2 under seeker, for which coordinated environmental quality review is not required. With respect to the special use permit, finding the proposed and intended use is consistent with the general standards for special use permits, and granting the requested special use permit conditioned upon receipt of site plan approval. And with respect to the application for site plan approval, finding the work and intended use to be consistent with Town Code Chapter 125, approving the application inclusive of the materials and site plan by Mark Kaminsky dated April 28, 2024. Authorizing the planning board chair to stamp and sign the site plan with 3 conditions listed, thereby authorizing the town to provide any permits necessary. And reminding the applicant that any plan sketches or other materials submitted to the building department need to be the same as those submitted to the planning board, or they could be rejected.
And your motion?
So moved. Second. Second.
I'll pull the board. Delise?
Aye.
Sharon? Aye. Sean?
aye.
Craig?
Aye.
Edna? Aye. And I vote aye. And next, we have the application of Lawrence Laybourne. 70, this is under old business again, continuing in there. 71 Orchard Drive, site plan, special use permit, and demo permit for the demolition of an existing single-family dwelling and the construction of a new single-family dwelling.
Health department has approved the project.
Okay. Jim?
Public hearing is closed. Again, for the board's consideration tonight, draft approval resolution for Lawrence Laybourne for site plan and special use permit under Town Code Chapter 125, 7265 and 69, which is the RCO, for demolition of a single-family dwelling and replacement with a new dwelling at 71 Orchard Drive within the RCH, reaffirming the action as type 2 under seeker. With respect to the application for special use permit, finding the work and intended use is consistent with the general standards and granting the requested special use permit. Planning board is hereby specifically waiving the requirement that structures in the RCO utilize traditional building materials per section 12569B8 per previous conversations. With respect to the application for site plan approval, finding the work and intended use is consistent with Town Code Chapter 125 and approving the application materials and site plan by John Powell Architecture and Mylan Studio, authorizing the planning board chair to stamp and sign the above cited site plan, 3 conditions listed there. Authorizing the town staff to provide any permits necessary to complete the work, and reminding the applicant that any plan sketches or other materials submitted to the building department need to be the same as those submitted to the planning board.
Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second? Second. I'll pull the board. Craig?
No.
No?
I vote no.
Thank you. Edna?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Sharon? Aye. Elise? Aye. And I vote aye. Motion carries with 1 negative vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck. So that brings us to the third order of old business this evening, and that is the beginning of our review under the full EAF of the Rockledge application at 492 Accurate Cook Road, site plan approval, special use permit, and wetlands permit for Conroe Wetlands. Would you, John, like to
Introduce this item.
She's refused, she's leaving.
Oh, and leave it.
Actually, I can give this mic back and then I could take Ed's if you
That's
guys
perfectly good.
are missing the mic.
Slide it back.
instead of Elvis is left, Edna is left.
It's really, it's really. Okay, all right, John.
Okay, so at the last planning board meeting, we talked about getting started on completing the EAF Part 2. And we decided that at this meeting, there was sort of a general consensus that we would take a look through the entire EAF Part 2, and then we would decide, the board would make a decision about logistically, how to go about the task of going through and completing the form. To try to help the board out, in between the last meeting and today, Tim and I met with Jim and Melody to take a look at the form and do a little bit of our own brainstorming about what we thought might be a suggested plan about how the board could go about this. And so that meeting culminated in an email memo which I sent around to you, which just gave you an outline of a suggested plan for proceeding. So I'll just take you through that quickly, and then you can, I'll turn it over to Jim, and then you can discuss how to go forward. But I thought that step one would still be just taking, I know you guys are familiar somewhat with the form because you've completed it before, but just to take a run through the whole form to refamiliarize yourselves with the topics. And then we could talk about the plan for going through. Jim has identified 6 questions that probably represent the low level of difficulty in terms of answering the questions and the depth of looking that has to be done into the other materials. And so we're suggesting that it may make sense to go through those 6 questions tonight. And if it turns out that they are, that they can be disposed of, we can get those out of the way. And then we can also talk about how to move on to next steps. And in the memo that I sent around to you, we are suggesting breaking the questions up into groups that most of the time the groups have some relation to each other. The first group that the first group, which is questions 1, 3, 4, 5, and 16, were ones that we thought it would be good for Christian Moore from CPL to be present at the meeting, that you go through those because they're technical, and having your consulting engineer present, I think would be very helpful. That's question 1, impact on land, question 3, impact on surface water, question 4, impact on groundwater, question 5, impact on flooding, and question 16, impact on human health. The second group that we suggested is not a group, actually, it's just one item. It's question 7, impacts to plants and animals, and that's probably a subject that is sufficient to take on for one meeting, just because there's a lot to cover there. The third group that we suggested was comprised of question 9, impact on aesthetic resources, and question 10, impact on historic and archaeological resources. Group 4 is also comprised of 2 questions. Question 13, impact on transportation, which includes traffic impacts, and question 15, impact on noise, odor, and light. And I mentioned in the memo that if you felt like it would be beneficial for you to have Stephen Mafia back here for that meeting, that's something that could be arranged. And then the final group, the 5th group, is also comprised of 2 questions. Question 17, consistency with community plans, and question 18, consistency with community character. And so tonight, you can have discussions about those groupings are not required by law. If there's a more logical way that you think to group the questions, you can definitely do that. This was just something to get the conversation started. And then we split them into groups so that you can address them, what each group is designed to be addressed at a single meeting, so that you don't have to be doing everything all at once. So that's the overall plan, and I'll leave you to talk about it. And I think Jim probably is prepared to speak with you tonight about the 6 questions that we've identified that, substantively you can get into looking at those questions this evening.
All right, do you want to open it up for some conversation?
So the 6 questions, as John noted, were
Sorry, Jim.
Oh, sorry.
Just before we go, Melody, one of the things I had done was, the board can see there's 3 screens here. The screen that is on the right now has the applicant's environmental assessment form part 1. So that's just there for you to refer to tonight if you need it. The EAF Part 2 that you would be talking about tonight is in the middle, and the EAF workbook is on the screen that's to the left. In addition, Melody, in order to make the board's discussions about this something that's easier to follow for the public, I brought with me today 30 copies of the blank EAF Part 2. And those are available for the board to distribute to anybody in the audience who is interested in following the discussion, because it will allow them to know what you're talking about. It'll also be good for them to see the sub-questions so they can sort of get an idea of what, these are questions framed by DEC to try to guide lead agencies in going through the questions. That blank EAF Part 2 was also posted on the town website too, for anybody that's interested. For the PDF version is there. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure that you remembered at the beginning of the meeting that those copies are available.
And that stack, Gretchen posted back next to the agenda for this evening. So anybody wishing to pick that up. On the back table, Gretchen? Is that right? Yeah, on the back table. So they're there for your use and distribution in any way that any of you see fit.
all right, so we'll jump right into it. And John, Kim, anytime, feel free to jump in. So for tonight, going through and looking at what we're going to do, we thought we'd kind of hit what we think were the easier questions, for lack of a better term, to go through with this. They get progressively more difficult in terms of discussion, I think, as we get into them. So the first ones were impact on geologic features, air, ag resources, open space and recreation, critical environmental areas, and energy. My recommendation is just that we go through these not necessarily in numerical order, but out of numerical order, just as a way to get started. I did provide to the board essentially a separate memo to kind of outline the EAF Part 2 and determination of significance, which is what we're eventually aiming toward completing at the end of this process. So all the work that's in here, anything that you talk about today, we'll take notes on, we can add into that, and we'll eventually wrap into that determination of significance at the end. So if everyone's...
I just want to pause for 1 minute and just check in between what John's outlined here and what Jim is suggesting. Are you all feeling this is an appropriate way to move forward at this
Yeah, I think
time?
that's the best way. We're going after the low-hanging fruit first and get the feel for what we're doing, and then we'll kind of tread into the things that require a little more deliberation.
Okay, then what I'd like to do when we get through these, assuming we get through these this evening, is go back to those other groupings that John created, to just check back in with you to see if they still hang together in a meaningful way. So we'll proceed.
So the first question that I wanted to discuss, and I'll bring it up on the screen here, is question 12, which is the impact on critical environmental areas. Here we go. And critical environmental areas, or CEAs, are areas in the state which have been designated by a local or state agency to recognize a specific geographical area with one of 4 different characteristics. I won't go through them because I can tell you confidently there are no critical environmental areas in the town of Rhinebeck. In addition, there's only one critical environmental area that's even close to the town of Rhinebeck. It's down in the southern end of the town, nowhere near the project that's here. So I can say with confidence, and I recommend that the town board state that no, there is no impact on a critical environmental area because we do not have any anywhere near this project. So the question is impact on critical environmental areas. The proposed action may be located within or adjacent to a critical environmental area or CEA. Again, we don't have any, so I would defer to the board as to how you'd like to answer the question.
We don't have any.
Yeah. Well, what is the name of that nearest one? Is it the Hudson?
It's,
Flats
I forget the name of it, it's down in the bay, at the south end. Vanderburg Cove, yes.
Vanderburg Cove, okay. And I think we should name that and just state that this project, the action of this project is not expected to have an impact on the nearest critical environmental area, which would be Vanderburg Cove.
Are we all in agreement then that this is no or small impact?
Yes.
Based
Yes.
on the fact that, okay.
So that was the easiest one, which we unofficially did in the meeting previously. As we know it, so. The next one that I thought would be good to go through is question number 6, which is impacts on air. And impacts on air state that the Part 2 form states the proposed action may include a state-regulated air emissions source. The applicant went through and answered that the project will not include or use on-site one or more sources of air emissions, including fuel combustion, waste incineration, or other processes or operations that would result in the creation of a state-regulated air emissions element. Therefore, by default, they are not creating any actions that are on the property now that would result in a state-regulated air emissions source. I did want to note for the board that, and we'll get into this in a little bit with energy, but the heating that's proposed to be used are heat pumps, which is noted by the New York State Clean Heat as being beneficial because they provide dual heating and cooling efficiency, zone temperature control, cleaner and safer use with no combustion of fossil fuels, thereby providing the lowest carbon emissions of any heating source, and they're easier and with minimal maintenance, with no fuel delivery needs. In addition to that, the applicant did note, but this does not pertain to this question because this is talking about state-regulated air emission sources, but I did just want to note it, that the action will generate or emit some methane related to the sewage treatment plant. The estimate is for very small amounts from the wastewater treatment plant, and that methane will be captured, controlled, or eliminated through the measures proposed in the proposal, which is to cover through duct collection and treatment. Now, even though that is occurring, that is not considered to be a state-regulated air emission source, which is what this question is about, but I did want to put that out there just so that you are aware of that. Back to the heat pumps, the plans did state that the carriage house will, and again, this is not a state-regulated air source, but I just think it's important to know. The carriage house will use the heat pumps, and they're going to take out the radiators and existing radiant baseboard heat. The gatehouse will use heat pumps throughout the building. The main estate will use heat pumps. The stone barn will be using heat pumps. And I didn't see it noted on the architectural plans, Mark, but I think you could probably tell us that I'm assuming the condos will also be using heat pumps, but I didn't see a note to that specifically.
I believe so.
Okay, so if we can just confirm that, that would be great. Again, it's not part of this question, but I think it's just important to note the impacts on air. So we'll confirm that, but again, it is not something we'd have to confirm for this question. So the seeker workbook essentially states that no or small impact will occur. Sorry, give me 1 second. If such regulated emissions were identified, then it could be a moderate to large impact. But without any, there are none identified. I think I'm confident saying that the answer to this could be no, but I defer to you based on the information presented and anything else we've discussed in the past.
Questions? What do you think, the planning board members?
I think Jim's suggestion makes sense to me.
You're all feeling that no or small impact is the...
Yeah, and this has all the feeling of applying to more of an industrial type setting, which is not really what we're faced with the residential development.
Right, like, if you look at letter A, it talks about 1,000 tons a year of carbon dioxide, 3.5 tons a year of nitrous oxide, all elements, none of which are being proposed in this proposal. I went a little further in depth just because I wanted to talk about the other potential impacts that you would have, but they are not specifically related to this. But they are not meeting any of the thresholds.
Right.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and I think, you know, as you continue to go through the form, you'll see you will get cues about the scale of what DEC has in mind by looking at those sub-questions.
Is everyone in concurrence?
Yes.
Yes? Yes? Okay. So we are agreeing no or small impact may occur.
Yes.
Thank you.
Which is good.
Hmm.
Right,
Which means, yes, you're answering no.
yeah,
Impacts on air would be no.
yeah.
The next question I think the board can take a look at is question 14, and that is impacts on energy, and that relates kind of to the discussion we just had. They're kind of tied together as it relates to heat pumps being efficient use without any emissions. Part 2 question had 4 questions that reference section D on the part 1 to answer the questions. Most of the sub-questions rely on sub-question D2K, which is only applicable to commercial and industrial projects. Since this is a residential project, that sub-question does not apply to the discussion unless it was not completed. So we then need to look to other resources to help assess the question further. Since any residential construction project, large or small, would result in an increase in the use of energy. I think it's obvious any new project would result in some increase in energy. So the first question, sub-question on impacts on energy asks if the action will require a new or upgraded to an existing substation. I did not see anything in the application, but I did want to confirm with Mark if there are any proposals for that. I don't believe so.
No proposal at this time.
The second question asked about the creation or extension of an energy transmission or supply system to more than 50 single or two-family residences or serving a commercial or industrial use. This application does not go to more than 50, so it does not meet that criteria, 36 residential units. This third question gets a little tricky. I think I know the answer to it, but we will discuss it a little bit. And that relates to the total amount of energy being used. It asks whether or not more than 2,500 megawatt hours, which is a term used to describe electrical power consumption and production, are estimated to be used by the project. Again, since sub-question D2K in the part 2 was not answered because it's only for commercial or industrial projects, and this is a residential project, we have to look elsewhere to find the answer for this. So the applicant is proposing 36 residential units with a security gatehouse, reuse of the existing historic carriage house building for an HOA rec facility, reuse of the existing wastewater treatment plant and the existing dorm building to be repurposed as an HOA maintenance facility for equipment and owner storage. I took a look at the U.S. Energy Information Administration tools online, which estimate that most homes use about 11 megawatt hours per year of electricity. So if you take that and multiply it by the 36 residential units, we come out with about 389 megawatt hours of power that would be used annually. This question is asking about whether or not we're going to come up to 2,500 or not. I did not see any way for me to calculate how we would account for the amount of energy used in the other buildings. But we're talking about 2,111 megawatt hours to reach the secret form defined 2,500 threshold. So essentially, 36 units are bringing us into about 389 megawatt hours of power. To get to that threshold, we need the remaining structures, which are the gatehouse, reuse of the carriage house building for an HOA rec facility, reuse of the wastewater treatment plant, and the dorm building for storage to utilize over 2,000 megawatt hours of power. I personally do not think that is the case based on my research, but I'm not a specialist in power usage. I don't know, Mark and Seth, if you guys have any thoughts on that or can provide any additional insight in terms of where we might be able to go with that power usage. But 2,500 megawatts of power is a lot, especially in the 36 residential units you're using under 400. So the 2,100, just to put it in perspective, the 2,100 megawatts of electricity that remains to hit that threshold would be the equivalent of another 191 houses.
Jim, does that presuppose any particular source for heating? Or?
It's a general, it's a federal level assessment of the average for a house in the US.
Right, well, if the average house is using natural gas and they just use the electric for lighting and maybe air conditioning in the summer, the calculation may be different. If, now that people are moving to the cleaner source, which is electricity, and driving electric cars and charging them at home, and having other types of appliances that are electrical consumers, is much better than getting that source from oil, but it may bias the calculation toward higher consumption on the year-round basis. So I don't know. Does that make any sense, Mark, or is that accounted for in the calculus?
So, Seth and I were just discussing, we can reach out to the other consultants. We'll reach out to the other consultants and get some estimates for power consumption or use, wastewater treatment plant, and some of those other structures. We'll do that.
It's the wastewater treatment plant that I think I'm looking at is the biggest draw. The other structures I really don't have a lot of concern about. They're going to have, occasional use here and there. They're going to be heated. I would probably treat those as the equivalent of a house, and you treat it as the equivalent of a couple houses. We're still going to be well below that 2,500 megawatt threshold. I don't think the wastewater treatment plant is going to get us there. Like I say, 2,500 megawatts is a lot. I just could not find any good representative examples to give to you as to what that really equates to, other than shopping malls and really large
steel mill,
retail stores and other types of things that really don't have a good comparison. So I don't think we reached that threshold. I just don't have a good comparison to give you for that. But we are well below it based on what I could calculate.
Right, and also the water system is also, there's booster pumps, you have to pump all the water, so we'll get a power consumption on that also.
Everybody okay with that? So what we're saying here is Mark is going to do some homework and provide us with additional information on the structures that we don't have calculations for.
So we will be coming back to this.
Yeah. And Jim, just for my own brain reference, and I know we've talked about this 100 times, if everything else is no, and then one is maybe moderate or large, how does that affect?
You'd still have to decide if it was no or small impact or large impact. There is guidance over here in the DEC, on the website that I did put in the memo I provided. But the 2,500 megawatts is an actual threshold number in the calculations, so it's a little more set in stone as to what we're looking at with this one. Again, I just don't have the numbers. I don't think we're anywhere near 2,500 based on the comparison, like Craig was saying, mills and malls and things and other large users. But I'd like to just get those numbers, a little bit tighter, so you have the information. We'll go from there.
So Jim, we're answering yes to this question because there is an increase in the usage. We're answering yes to this question because there is an increase in the usage of a form of energy, and then what will be completed is CD&E of the sub-questions later when the applicant provides the information.
It has yet to be determined whether or not we've reached that threshold. Is that
right? So I think based on our discussion, we all agreed. Well, we didn't actually go through it, but I think there was the head nod that for A, the proposed action will require a newer upgrade to an existing substation. The answer to that was no. So I think we can say no or small impact to that one if the board agrees. And then the action requiring creation or extension of energy transmission facilities for more than 50 residential units, the answer was no to that one. So I think we can answer that. We have a question about C right now, and then I was going to get to letter D, which is the last sub-question next after we go through this one. So at the moment, we're just asking Mark to just give a little more information for us on sub-question C.
But the main box at the top where the check yes.
At the moment.
Yes.
The final question asks if the proposed action will involve heating and cooling of more than 100,000 square feet of building area when complete. Based on the proposal and the details in the area and bulk table on site plan sheet 2 of 13 that has maximum building coverages, the answer to that is that the total maximum building coverage for the project, based on the calculation from the percentages and the acreages that were provided on the sheet, is 77,536.8 square feet, which is below the 100,000 square foot building threshold in that question. So my recommendation would be that no, we do not hit that 100,000 square foot threshold for total building area when the project is complete.
And that again is against a specific number.
Correct. So if everyone agrees, we would answer no to sub-question D, in which case for 14, impact on energy, we're just looking for a little
Clarification and see, and we can come back to that at a future date.
Okay.
Great. All right. The next question is question 2, unless anyone has any questions, sorry. Not that one, we good? The next one I thought we were going to go through is question number 2. No, 2 is impact on geologic features. We can do that one yet. We're skipping around, so I kind of had a little bit of an order to them, energy and air kind of related, and then, as you see, we're starting getting into some that have some sub-question issues, so we're starting these and working order. So question 2, impact on geologic features. The question asks, or states the proposed action may result in the modification or destruction of or inhibit access to any unique or unusual landforms on the site, such as cliffs, dunes, minerals, fossils, or caves, and it gives us the sub-questions below, identifying any landforms and whether that proposal would affect a registered national landmark. Based on the Part 1 that was completed by the applicant, there are no unique geologic land features on the site that fit the criteria for question 1. When you look at some additional data, it does state that about 1% of the site does have bedrock outcroppings, low-profile bedrock outcrops of sandstone and shale on steep slopes. The EAF addendum that was provided by the applicant does note that all of those rock outcroppings have been avoided, will not be impacted. So, again, there are no unique geological features, but even digging a little bit deeper, where we look at, say, the outcroppings, which we talk about with lots of projects in this town, we are avoiding those as well. So I believe that the answers so far, there will be no impact. The other question, that's a specific question, is whether or not there would be an impact on a national natural landmark. There are no such designations in the town of Rhinebeck. So my recommendation to the board would be that we would look at no or small impact would occur based on the information submitted.
I would concur with that.
I do as well. Others in agreement?
Agreed.
The next question is question 11, impact on open space and recreation. And the question on part 2 says, the proposed action may result in the loss of recreational opportunities or a reduction of an open space resource as designated in any adopted municipal open space plan. So right off the bat, I can tell you the town of Rhinebeck does not have an adopted open space plan. So the answer to that will technically be no. However, again, I wanted to dig a little deeper just to make sure we were kind of looking at all of this. The proposal currently is and always has been currently is and always has been privately owned. The applicant's proposal does not impact or impair the ecosystem services, create a loss of a recreational resource, or impact an informal community open space resource, because no such resource exists on the site and has not in the past. The town doesn't have an adopted open space plan, so there is no impact with that element of the question. However, if you look a little deeper in the town's comprehensive plan, which discusses open space, which I wanted to do, I took a look and did not find any recommendation in the plan that stated that this property should be used as an open space resource. It does have a general statement that the town should preserve and protect open space and view sheds, agricultural and forested lands, and gateways, as Rhinebeck's housing stock is moderately expanded. So I think the comp plan seems to have kind of undertaken an understanding that development is going to happen and that the open spaces should be protected to the extent feasible, given that we're going to look at moderate housing stock expansion. And based on the site plans, most of this property will still remain undeveloped. The houses and the development is being retained within the existing structures and has sort of been clustered in a way in certain parts of the property, leaving the vast majority of it untouched. The EAF states all development impacts natural functions, even if it's in a small way. There could be limited situations where no impact could occur. And an example of where there might not be an impact would be if development of a new structure was, say, to be built on an existing parking lot. at a large shopping mall or something like that, where it's already been developed. And as we know, a lot of this is already taking place in existing buildings. But the reality is, when we come back to the question itself, which asks if the action will result in loss of recreational opportunities or reduction of open space in a designated adopted municipal open space plan, the answer is no, and it also does not conflict with anything that I found in the comprehensive plan stating this property to be public open space.
So the loss of recreational opportunities is implied in that there are recreational opportunities for the public?
I believe so, yes.
Is that your?
Yes, yes. Public recreation resources.
And can you refresh my memory in terms of the, I don't know if it's a percentage or what, but in total over the development, how much of this is going to remain open and undeveloped, relatively speaking?
The EAF has the totals for disturbance area. I'm just going to take a look at that.
It's D letter B.
So of the 135 acres, about 17 acres is going to be impacted.
17 to 35? 135, 17
Yes.
to 135.
About 15%, 16.
Look at them.
And say more 10 to 12, maybe. Go ahead. 12, somewhere between 12 and 15%.
Does this action consume the building envelope opportunity for that site? Like, it's, everything is being concentrated in this one area. The remaining area of the property wouldn't be developable because there is such density on one end of the lot. Is that, it can't be subdivided?
No, well, no, after this, so this is the project that will happen on the property.
Yes.
And the density that's being proposed is the density that is provided by.
Maximum,
the zoning
yeah.
regs.
So really, it's like a de facto easement. It's being protected by the town's zoning,
Yes.
in other words.
Yes.
So,
But you did mention easement. The CAB in their letter did state, this is something we'll get into later, that the town should consider asking for an easement on some of the more sensitive parts of the property. But that's something we can get into outside of secret.
And because, as it's being proposed, the development will be pushed to the interior of the property in such a way that the view shed from the road surrounding it will not detract from a sense of open space. Is that a fair statement to say? I mean, you're not pushing the development right up by the road where in the past you could drive by and see open space going in. Is that, am I?
It's just adaptive reuse of the existing structures. That's the only thing that takes place along Aqueduct Road.
Correct. To existing buildings that are already visible.
That's correct.
Other questions, any other comments or questions here about this?
just one, Jim, at the beginning, you had mentioned something about the town not having an open space plan, is it? Is that something that the town should be working on?
That's a question that can be raised, not for me to make a determination.
Because that might be a good task to set the Conservation Advisory Board for, is working on how the town could achieve that.
Yeah, and there's lots related to open space in the comprehensive plan. We don't have a plan per se, lots of recommendations that we acted upon.
But this is referring to, but this is specifically saying an adopted municipal
An adopted
open
plan,
space plan.
Yeah, I want to be clear, I'm going beyond what the questions are asking, just so you know that I'm looking beyond what the question is asking. That's why I say, as far as the question is stated, an adopted municipal open space plan, the answer is no, we don't have one. So we can't be
doing something that's against that open space plan, then you have to look at the sub-questions. But I do go beyond that just to provide additional context in terms of what we do and don't have for your consideration. But I think the reality, we don't have a plan, the comp plan doesn't talk about this being, public open space, and the fact that the property currently is and always has been privately owned. Really are the three main factors into playing into the discussion.
So that would suggest that the answer to this is no.
I believe so.
Any differences of opinion here, or any
No, I concur with that.
concerns?
I agree.
All right, so everyone good with open space and recreation? All right, well, the last one we're hoping to get through tonight was impact on agricultural resources. It's question 8. The question asks, or states, sorry, they don't actually ask questions, the way these are worded is kind of odd, but it says the proposed action may impact agricultural resources, yes or no? And then gives us the sub-questions that go along with that. And based on my review of the information submitted, as well as looking at the NRI and some other documents, town comprehensive plan, the analysis that I came up with is that the site is not currently and has not recently been used for farming activities. The BAF project narrative attachment A noted that the site is primarily wooded and has not been farmed for many decades. Numerous old farm stone walls and remnant roads run through the site, as is typical for the area. The applicant did complete an agricultural data statement because while the project site itself is not in an agricultural district, 2 adjacent properties on the opposite side of Acton Hook Road are in Ag District 20. The proposal is proposing a modest addition, I call a modest addition to the existing structure visible from Acton Hook Road, which is the closest area of impact to the properties in Ag District 20. And that structure is proposed to become 4 residential units if the ZBA variance for moving units is approved. The remainder of the project in the developed area is well within the site, not immediately adjacent to any of the properties within an ag district. When you look a little further into this, looking at soils, the project site does include the Dutchess Cardigan soil type, which is one of the New York State Land Classification System soil types that we look at when we're looking at agriculture. The county NRI soils chapter states that most of the Dutchess Cardigan Nassau soil types are used for cropland, pastureland, woodland, and residential development. The 2022 Town of Rhinebeck NRI Ag Resources Map confirmed the information found in the Dutchess County NRI Soils Chapter and identified the presence of some soil in the farmland of statewide importance category and some prime farmland. But again, there is no active farming on the property. It has not been undertaken on the property for quite a long time. The prior use was daytop, which was an active use on site, and the proposal will not be taking any active farmland out of use. So the question then is, do we check this as yes or no for the proposed action may impact ag resources? I think the answer to that is yes. It will impact ag resources because you have ag soils. But when you look at the sub-question related to this, it really comes down to the fact that, and you look at the DEC guidance, a small proportion of the soils will be impacted and the remainder will remain as is, it says in agriculture, but it's not actually in agriculture, remain as is. So there are soil types on there, but they are not in active agricultural use. And most of it could be used again in the future, theoretically. That would be a small impact.
So when it says the proposed action may impact agricultural resources, it just stops there. It does not talk about ag resources within 50 miles or within the property itself, or, John, how do you deal with something like that that is somewhat vague, right?
Well, why don't you let's take a look at the workbook and see if it's helpful in that regard.
So the memo that I provided for you does have small, moderate to large impact kind of guidance in it, I guess you'd say. To bring it up here on the screen, DC's got that that information available.
Okay, so that's on page 14 of 27?
14 and 15.
14,
So what we have
14 and 15.
What we have on the page that's noticed in the two is what's on the screen.
I know, but I can't read that.
Yeah, no, that's why I just get look pretty copy, just because I enjoy this.
So this is the project will temporarily use these soils, that's the section you're referring to. So the first two relate to active ag use. I don't see it in plans.
It seems like it's applying very much to the soils of that property, I mean, based on what Jim has provided here. That was a good question for sure, but this just seems like how will it affect those soils?
Well,
You know?
and is there any other site where soil is possible to grow properly?
Right.
Like are we eliminating farms by allowing this almost essentially as under moderate to large?
Yeah, and you'll see in the workbook that they're talking about, DEC's mentioning, thinking about ag soils on this site and also whether the development that's proposed could have adverse impacts to ag uses on adjacent properties. I don't think it's the
we're
case
saying
here.
immediately adjacent.
Yes, that's what they don't say immediate, but that's the implication. I mean,
Okay.
adjacent
Is adjacent.
Definitely
means
within
to
the
be.
Rhinebeck.
I think it really is focused on ag and farming. If you look at under the moderate to large impact, it has other criteria to consider, and it talks about how the proposed action may sever, cross, or otherwise limit access to agricultural land. It talks about how some developments make it harder for farmers to access their agricultural fields. The installation of fences, gates, structures, and even landscaping in the wrong location can prevent farmers from reaching their fields. Similarly, changes in roads and bridges, driveway configuration, or changes to traffic can limit the ability for farmers to use large farm equipment and trucks. Essentially on the roads, they don't state that, but I think that's the implication. So I really do think this is focused specifically, a lot on essentially what we do with the ag data statement, ensuring that we're not limiting and inhibiting agricultural uses.
Yeah, and the workbook says, how, under how to answer this question. The workbook says, if any agricultural activities are taking place on or adjacent to the project site, or if the project site is within a New York State Ag District, the proposed project may have adverse impacts on farming. And if so, check yes to question 8 and then answer the sub-questions.
I think it's no. I don't think it has an impact.
I'd say, like you said, it hasn't been used in farming. And if they don't go through with this project, it's like it's trees. And the adjacent properties this isn't going to impede access to the property.
Or farming activities on adjacent
So
property.
this would seem to be a no.
Feels like a no to me.
Yeah. I have a hard time conjuring potential impact. It just doesn't seem, everything is well contained within the site. The site is not currently being used as for agriculture, and if there's agriculture going on across the street, this doesn't seem to get in the way of that.
I hear consensus around no.
So based on that, those were the first 6 we wanted to run through tonight. I think we just have one question that we can get a little more clarification on, a confirmation from Mark. We'll circle back to that one at a future time. But the other 5, I think we have answered definitively, so we'll hold on to that until we get to the end of the process and discuss this as a whole. So I'll turn it back to John, I think, at this point to discuss where we're headed.
Do we have a sheet of paper that shows how you were creating those other groups? Is that somewhere? in there that we should-
Yeah,
That would be helpful for me to be able to see those.
I copied John's, I got it. No, it's all spaced out. I'll work on the spacing while we.
And we're not proposing at this point that group one go first or group two or whatever, they're just numbered that way for,
Yeah, they're not in any particular order. I guess there's a general, I think there was a general theme of trying to go with increasing the level of difficulty as the groups go
or
along.
complexity.
Yes, yeah.
Let me just throw this out there, John. I was looking at this for group one. I don't know when everyone, if we're gonna meet for this every 2 weeks, or a month or whatever. I do think Christian's gonna need some time to put this together. So if we're gonna do this again in 2 weeks, I don't know he'll be able to turn around his review on 1, 3, 4, 5, and 16 in 2 weeks. That's just my thinking on this. But maybe he can, I don't know. I haven't talked to him about it specifically yet, so
Yeah.
I'd like to give him a little time for that one.
Yeah.
But other than that, I don't really have any thoughts on the timeline.
I just want to say I appreciate the strategy, and I find it really helpful.
Others? Is the process we're outlining or proposing here seem, and especially after this evening, does this feel like the right way to approach it? And are you comfortable with the proposal here in terms of what we're lumping together? Do they seem to hang together?
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
As we go along and seeing how it's going, is there any possibility that we would group together, one or two groups together?
But there's always the possibility we could do that. And I think where we want to, if you're all feeling good about this general strategy right now in terms of how we're going to group them and how we're going to proceed, I think the next thing we want to take up tonight is, do we want to be doing something at every meeting going forward? Do you feel you want to alternate doing this? How frequently do you want to be doing it? Do you want to, we're working with Gretchen in terms of new applications that are coming in and how we're trying to schedule our meetings in such a way that we can keep new applications and ongoing applications going, but that we're trying to build into the agenda for the evening enough time. And these, we understand, were the ones that we thought were probably the easiest to get through, and I think you'll agree that they're going to get more complicated. So it's a matter of how much do you want to tackle in a meeting, and like I said, we're trying to, and I'm of the opinion that if we want to keep pushing on this, that we already work very hard, and we sometimes have 6 or 7 public hearings, and we may get to the point where we're going to have to ask people to wait a little longer if we want to get through this. So we're not there yet, and we're trying to be very mindful of it, but it's a balancing act here to keep this moving at the same time that we're trying to keep regular business moving.
Would it be appropriate to, I guess, make the decision of, like, if we could see it in 2 weeks or see it in a month, depending on what's upcoming, and make that, like, for a perfect example, if we need Christian support for the upcoming group one, and we know that's not going to be able to be turned in 2 weeks, then let's push it the month, and let's get that. But if we know the following 2 weeks after that, we could go on with group two, then let's, let's propose that and comment on that at the board. Is that, do we go week to, meeting to meeting to?
Are you
I
saying
think-
based on the volume that we have?
Yeah.
That's voting? I think
Yeah,
that
and
makes sense.
potentially based on you might look at group two and be like, oh, that's easy, and then it has 27 questions associated to it that are all very difficult to answer. So, on paper it looks easy, and so that's a prime example of how easy things might seem, but then in reality as we dig into these, they're going to get deeper. So I would propose that we kind of take it on with knowing the upcoming schedule and knowing the potential expertise that we might need to help answer the questions and what their availability would be, but without impacting and pushing this. If we did it every 2 weeks, we're looking at January, right? We don't want to be doing this in 6 months from now either. So I don't know. I don't know if it really helped anyone, but that's my way my brain's feeling.
Yeah, I agree with Sean, based on the agendas we have coming up, as long as we're not impeding on the new applications who need us as well, and keep moving along. And also maybe they get shifted in what we do when, based on how dense we think that will go.
I think that was part of what you did when you put these together, John, right? Is the discussion, the amount of time you think each discussion will take.
Yes.
To a degree.
I mean, it's a guess, of course, but,
And,
I mean, the other alternative is to just have a special meeting and just do just this. That's the, I think, if you're one to consider what alternatives are
I
out
said
there.
no last meeting.
and,
I really haven't changed that thought. I mean, if we have Christian potentially needed in 2 weeks, it doesn't seem practical, would it make sense for us to take on group 2 next, meeting? Just so we could continue moving along?
since I can't read that far.
Or do we really-
That's impact on plants and animals, and that's gonna be a pretty pithy, topic, which is with the reason that I left it so low.
Well, of the other groups, okay, 1 we have to wait on, 2 is pretty intense. Of 3, 4, and 5, is it possible that you could say, just suggest one of those for the next meeting?
Well, I wouldn't suggest 5. I think it makes sense for you to, I don't think consistency with community plans is gonna be very complicated for you, but I think most of the time, I think there's a reason that consistency with community character is listed as the last question, because I think you're in the best position to answer those questions after having been through the rest of the form. So I wouldn't suggest that. I mean, you could do 13 and 15 at the next meeting, which are impact on transportation and noise, odor, and light. Well, he doesn't have to be here. I mean, you do have reports from him. I think question 3, I think there's more information that needs to come from SHPO. Melody, is that right? Before, does the board have everything in front of it that it needs to have to?
The applicant doesn't have a final letter saying no adverse impact from SHPO. I believe they're in the process of, working with SHPO now. I don't know, have you received any information back from them?
No, I know they resubmitted.
They resubmitted, but then there's the 30-day window that they have to respond. It is one, John, that I think, much as we did tonight with saying we need additional information, we could have a discussion around it, I believe, and hold it open in terms of a final decision until we get the sign-off. I don't think we're in a position in the end to sign off until SHPO says there's no adverse impact, but we can talk about what we know and what we see in the application at this point. And I think those 2 might be reasonable, maybe the 2 we've just talked about might be the
Okay.
ones we look at the next meeting.
Okay.
And you want to just do that in 2 weeks? You want to keep forging on with this?
I mean, I prefer that over having a separate meeting. I know this is a board, and I've been proud about not having a separate meeting. This is a board, and I can be outvoted on that. But if we can, do, I think for the public's sake, and I think also for the applicant's sake, if we can keep chipping away every couple of weeks, I think that's fair. And there might be points where we have to push it a month, but I think in good effort if we're making progress.
What do we have in 2 weeks, Gretchen?
I had blocked off the new applications because we weren't
So
sure.
we have, that's great.
So you have, I think there's 4 or 5 public hearings, but
All
I
right.
think some of them.
And the other thing is, if we get into one of these at the next meeting, and it becomes a little too much, we can decide we're not going to go to the second section.
Yeah, and that's the thing I just want to say. This is all suggested. There are no rules. you have to diligently make your way through the form, but once you decide, it's not like you're stuck on a particular track. You can always zig or zag depending on how the process is unfolding.
And maybe as we see how it goes and forecasting what some of the more difficult ones, and then we can continue to decide we're okay the next meeting or we're not.
Yep.
Or at some point, we may just revisit, do we need a special meeting for that particular
Yeah.
work?
Then the only thing I'll say about ad-libbing is just bear in mind that, giving Jim or whatever consultants are going to be, whatever help you need, they have to be given advance notice, because even with tonight's questions, Jim had to do a lot of work to make sure that you're prepared, especially to be able to answer questions that have specific thresholds and whatnot. So
Maybe that's a question we should ask. If Jim, if a 2-week schedule is putting a lot on him.
So therefore, be careful.
No, it's fine. And Christian may be able to pull these together, but I haven't asked him, and there is a lot here, I think,
Yeah.
particularly, these two items we've been talking about a lot. There's a lot of detailed numbers in them. I just think he needs to be able to pull that together, and we haven't asked him to do that in 2 weeks. I just think we need to give him a little more time.
I agree, and the only other one that's up right now that we suggested we might bring somebody in was Stephen Mafia. But it is important to keep that in mind, that if we look ahead and see that we might need expert support, we should try and order them in that way to give people enough notice.
Is there one easier to tackle on your side, Jim, if we're having a meeting in 2 weeks from now?
I mean, I can get into aesthetic and historic resources if that's what you want to do.
Okay.
I think the information on that is pretty straightforward. The discussion on that amongst yourselves would be more difficult.
Yeah.
So you're suggesting only one group for the last one, or two?
I think John kind of arranged those, thinking that we're also going to have other elements going on, and that, so these were arranged in such a way we could get through them. But we can certainly do 3 if you wanted to do another one. I'm open to that.
Well, 3 is resources and archaeology.
Aesthetic resources,
Yeah.
historic.
And what was the other one?
We can talk about it. We can do.
Number 2.
No, I think 2 is the trade involved.
Yeah.
And this one requires a lot. I think John's right. This requires a lot of input from Christian. I'll be working with him on that, but I think it requires a lot from him. So I would say for that, I'd ask Christian maybe if you can do it for the first November meeting, if that works in terms of scheduling.
Yeah, I think let's do the, I don't know that I want to put, noise, odor, and,
Sorry, noise, order, and light.
noise, odor, and light, it kind of hangs with transportation, but then it also doesn't. I think transportation is a big one. There's been a lot of information about that. Noise, odor, and light. Is there a reason you lump those together, John? Just
Only vaguely. I had to assemble groups, so.
Why don't we say we're gonna at least tackle number 3 next time, and then if we get through them quickly and we're sitting here and it's not 9:30, and we can jump into 13 or 15, but I know there's preparation on Jim's side, so I don't know.
Okay.
But I don't know if that works for Jim, I guess.
I will see what I can do. It shouldn't be a problem.
I would suggest, go ahead.
No, I just say that he can communicate with us also how that unfolds, but at least we'll go with 3, and if more involves on your end, we might consider more, and if not, that's it.
Well, I'll get you a memo again of
Yeah.
trying to essentially pull together all the summary details, and then, that way you'll know kind of where I stand by the Thursday before.
And back to Tom's question, just also without burning you out, because you gave us a 27-page document tonight to make it.
To help.
This is an easy one.
Right, I'm aware, so I'm just throwing it out.
Very helpful.
I just want to finish up here. I'm going to ask the applicant's representatives, in laying it out this way and asking you for additional information, are you able to keep up with this proposed schedule? So if we're asking you to go out and get more information and bring it back, you're comfortable with this process?
Yes. You may need, tomorrow we'll reach out to the other consultants for a response and get that information back to the board, ASAP.
Any final comments, questions, concerns from planning board members? Okay. John?
I just wanted to say that, just on the impacts to plants and animals, you may want to start looking back into the materials because there's quite a bit in the record on those. And I think a lot of it's attached to the EAF, those reports.
It is the addendums.
The addendums to the EAF. And there's quite a lot of material there. When I was going through, looking through it, that's one of the reasons I left that as a single subject matter. So I'm just giving you a heads up just in terms of getting yourselves prepared to for that particular subject matter. There's a lot of material in the record and a lot to cover.
So for October 21st, I will do questions 9, 10, and try and get to 13 and 15 as well.
Maybe 13 and 13 in that order.
John? So on April 22nd, you responded.
Anyone else planning?
Hold on 1 second.
Yep.
John, on April 22nd, we responded to the planning board. There were response to public comments. And the template we used was the EAF. So it's part 2. And so it's basically a summary. You know, it's not as much information that initially was submitted with the application, but yeah. Okay.
So this is the document that Mark was talking about, and it is a good summary. And then, if you would, as I said, the appendices to the EAF Part 1 is where there's a lot of information as well.
Is there a date on that, just for?
What's that?
Is there April?
April 22nd, 2020.
Okay.
Jim, can we find that and recirculate it?
Is that this document?
That is,
That's it.
You're so organized. You have no idea how many files I have. I'm trying to keep it organized because there's so much
So
material.
we're going to ask Jim to recirculate that, so that it'll be at the top of your email screen, probably before you get home.
Yeah.
Anything else? Thank you, everybody. I think this felt good for a first pass. Appreciate your comments and your preparation for the meeting, and especially want to thank Jim and John and Kim for all of the legwork they did in advance to bring this stuff to us. You had a comment or a question?
I have a question about the logistics. I realize that the public input is only to occur after the whole questionnaire is completed. But if we do have information, because we've been so close to this all along, that we think will help you, or if something's blatantly wrong that we know of, and should we tell you somehow, or just wait until 4 months, or however long this is going to take?
Well, what we're trying to do now is allow the planning board the space it needs to take these and have the kind of conversation we had among ourselves tonight. So I would recommend that you collect the information and wait until it's presented at that time. I appreciate you wanting to continue to offer information, and so I would just, and I know you're a group and you meet, but the more you can do to, get all that information together so that it comes in. I hope you can see that we're all cognizant of the amount of work that is before us, but we're very aware of the fact that it's in the best interests of you and the applicant and all of us to move this as efficiently and effectively as we can. So, yes.
Just to reinforce the question, because you're grouping this in a way to isolate specific questions, in terms of efficiency, wouldn't it make more sense for us to provide additional information that will be helpful in making your determinations versus waiting until the end of everything and then you having to go back and revisit particular sections out of the context of your, obviously in-depth conversations and discussions that you're having?
I don't agree. I think that the plan we've outlined, I think we've been looking at this a long time. I think the people sitting at the table feel that we have access, and we've just set an example of recirculating information. We're more than willing to do that. All of your comments in the past are on the record and available to all of us. So I do believe that we have a lot of information and a lot to get through, and I think we've outlined this as the best way we can work at this point. I appreciate your comments, and you know what? If we get into this, Linda and others, if we see a problem, I trust the people sitting around this table to say, wait a minute, this may not be working, and we'll revisit it. But right now, this is the way we're attempting to go. Are you all in agreement, or do you?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's a lot of new ground to be covered. And I think we've, to this point, been very thorough, and I intend to be equally thorough going through this process. And I think just because we may not agree with people, it doesn't mean that we've ignored what they had to offer.
Yeah, and I would just say that one of the ideas behind doing this the way that we've suggested doing it is to try to create a quiet space for the board to be able to take on these questions. And then, you know, if you look at the information after you've gone through and maybe before you do your finalize your determination of significance, you can look at what's being submitted from the public and see whether anything that's submitted makes you doubt or change your minds with regard to any of the questions you've answered, and you're always free to be able to go back and make a change if you're presented with information that does change your mind about something that's been done already. Until you actually adopt and practically speaking, the way that's going to happen is you're going to answer all these questions, and then there'll probably be a straw poll just so that we can begin drafting for you for Part 3 of the EAF, but you won't make your actual determination until the Part 3 of the EAF's been drafted, circulated to the board, and then put up for a vote. So there's room and space in there to go back and change your mind. And Kim and I just concluded this process with a board in another town where they did go back on a couple of items, and they changed some of their answers to some of the questions based on information that came in after the first cut. So,
Well, based on the accumulation of information over 18 questions.
yeah, absolutely. And you're also, you're getting new information from the applicant or supplemented information from the applicant as you're going on. So.
Just one more question. Can we get a copy of Jim's memo and also Mr. Lyons has prepared for the board? Is that available to the public?
I haven't been accepted.
Yeah, my memo's privileged and confidential, but Jim's memo's available.
Can we request that through Gretchen and get a copy?
Gretchen will handle that and put up what you need. You want them asking you for it, or do you want to post it? Jim's memo, what is your preference?
I can post it if you guys want me to. I mean, that's.
Okay. You okay?
I mean, or should it be something that's requested?
I think it's requested. I think it should be available. I don't know. I don't know.
It's guidance to the board.
Yeah, I mean, it literally just takes these 3 pieces of information and puts them on one doc.
Yeah, pulling in some other outside
Yeah,
information.
right. I think it should definitely go.
All right, so we'll handle it as we do. Once we accept, the way it handles now, Jim submits his meeting notes to us, we accept them, and at that point, they're then public information. So I'm hearing you say that you would want this treated the same way, going forward with each meeting.
So do you want me to post them, or do you want it as a requested, though?
I would say let them request it. Okay? All right. If there's no other business, could I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? So moved. Motion second. All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you, everyone.